In order to tie this together, we wanted to hold a brief and very informal discussion focusing on two questions, the first of which is, according to your research, do you think that Ottoman women were oppressed?
According to my research, I believe that Ottoman women were not oppressed because during the whole marriage and childbirth situations, they were given a lot of praise, they were given a lot of attention, so all in all, I do not believe they were oppressed.
I would have to agree with you. I would say by Western standards of, liberty as far as obviously voting, there was no voting, things like that go. Of course, it's sort of modernist to look back and call these women oppressed. In the harems, they certainly were treated very well, and as I said, they had lots of opportunities for social mobility.
I agree with what you were saying, Amanda, with regards to looking at it from a Western perspective. I found very much in my research, as many of the historians that I was reading agreed, that Ottoman women at that time were really no more oppressed, per se, than Western women. And if you took away the stigmas of religion and maybe difference in dress, in actuality, what they were politically, socially, and legally able to do didn't differ all that much from what women in the West were able to do. So I guess, to sum it up, I would agree that I don't think that they were necessarily oppressed by the standard that the stereotype would suggest.
And secondly, why do you think it's important to study Ottoman women's history, or relevant at least?
Based on my studies, I believe it is important to study women's Ottoman history because you see the differences in marriage traditions and childbirth traditions, and it's important to learn about the customs all around the world.
I think it's really interesting to look at it, and it doesn't always have to be looked at in this context, but at least right now with globalization and with fighting two wars in the Middle East, I think it's important that we at least attempt to understand the history and culture of the region, and especially with regards to our thoughts on possibly liberating women over there. It may or may not be true, but I think it's important that we try to understand it and decide whether that's true or not.
From a more, I guess, global point of view that would apply to any type of women's history, I think it's important to study Ottoman women's history, just as it's important to study any women's history, because I think that we find, being history majors ourselves and interacting with a lot of these texts, that oftentimes in a legal history or a political history or a social history, women are sometimes left out of that overall look at what a society was like at the time. And I think that to study their history in particularly kind of gives you a good look into what that other half of the society was doing, maybe not while making laws or doing negotiations or business in the greater community. I think that it's definitely important to know what half of your community is doing at all times.
Thank you very much for your attention, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation.